Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on our Encore Reopening Pennsylvania's Restaurant presentation. As I've said before, but if you can keep your lines muted during the presentation and just use the chat feature at the end, Melissa and John will address those questions as we get to that part. With that, I'm going to turn this over to John and Melissa to kick this off and get us started.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Melissa, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in today. I'm John Longstreet. I think most of you know me. I'd like to spend just a moment before Melissa starts through the presentation to explain how we got where we are today. And I will start by saying the PRLA, since the day that this first hit our industry, this devastating crisis, has been working to try to help the industry in many different ways. I'm not going to go into all of those now. Those of you who have tuned into our weekly updates with Melissa or the daily updates that give you all the information you need to know about what's happening in the COVID-19 pandemic are well aware of the efforts that we've been making to try to help you and your team members get to the other side of this. Maybe one of the most important parts is the reopening process. Almost since the day this started, we started talking about how we're going to get reopened and what reopening is going to look like. And about 6 weeks ago, we convened a restaurant reopening task force of restaurant and hotel professionals from across the state to try to determine what the reopening process should look like. That task force created a document called the Pennsylvania Restaurant Promise with 3 specific goals in mind. One was to provide guidance to restaurants when they reopened on being able to provide a safe environment for employees and guests. The second was to provide a reassurance to guests that it's good to come back to restaurants now. We're doing everything we can to keep you safe. And third, and maybe most importantly, was to show the Wolf administration, Governor Wolf and his team, that we were a prepared and professional partner in trying to develop guidelines for reopening. That turned out to be really important because it did get us a seat at the table to work with the governor on reopening guidelines, both for outdoor dining in the yellow phase, which was not originally envisioned, and also for the first phase of restaurant opening in the green phase. There's been a lot of debate over the last 6 weeks since we started this process about when we should open, how soon we should open, but clearly that call was the governor's call, the governor, the health professionals, and his team in Harrisburg. The court sustained that when some folks thought that the governor shouldn't have that power and tried to challenge him in court. The legislature that tried to take over the process was vetoed, and clearly the ability of the governor to manage a state of emergency was sustained. So our goal was to, particularly in light of that, recognize that we needed to work with the governor to try to get the best standards that were most practical and sensible while being safe for reopening the industry. And the Restaurant Promise got us a seat at the table. We worked closely with the members of the team, including the governor, throughout the process. The PRLA officers, 2 of the officers, and Mike Axiotis, who's on the National Restaurant Association board and the CEO of Lehigh Valley Restaurant Group, Jim Frisch from PJW Group, and Bill Kowaleski, founder of Victory Brewing, and I got a chance to work with the governor and his team on the reopening standards. And I will say that the outcome was probably the most balanced set of standards across the nation. Most of our counterparts in other state restaurant associations would like to have Pennsylvania standards. Most of the states in the Northeast do not have even outdoor dining open yet, let alone indoor, which we have in about 18 counties now as of last Friday. There's no question, if you look at the standards, you might say, well, these are onerous. It's a lot for us to deal with. And that's why we're here today, to help you to understand how to deal with them successfully, safely, and to stay within the governor's orders. There'll be a lot of opportunity for questions today. We'll try to answer all the questions that we have. And again, while we would have maybe liked to have been open a little bit sooner, we didn't have that option. So we just tried to make sure that as we got open, that we got open in the best way, the most practical way, the most sensible way, and yet safe for your employees and for your guests. So with that, our goal today is to be able to help you understand the standards, be able to comply with them in the most practical fashion possible, not to debate how we got where we are today. That's why I wanted to explain it to you, not to debate whether the the restaurant should have ever been closed or not closed. That was all beyond our pay grade, frankly. Our goal is to try to make it as smooth as we can for you now. But I will say we're now 3 days into opening in the green phase, and I had a chance to visit a couple of restaurants. They were operating at a very brisk pace, pace that looked very similar to before they closed. Obviously, they were within standards, and the guests were very happy to be back. The team members are doing a great job in operating in a safe fashion. So I'm very excited about the next direction of our industry and us being responsible partners in moving the state out of this crisis. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to, I know you already know her, Melissa Bova has been helping to manage us through this, probably the single most important person for the industry in trying to get things done throughout this process. And Melissa, appreciate all your hard work along the way. I'll turn it over to you, and then I'll chime in when you need me.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I will say this again because I see some repeats, but I think some of the repeats just really like watching my webinars, so I'm going to assume that. This is duplicative of the webinar we did on Friday. So there's not going to be any information today that is different than the information that we provided on Friday. So if any of you thought this was different, I just wanted to make that clear from the beginning. Those of you who have watched our webinars before, I will tell you everything that I know. I will tell you what I think I know, and I will tell you what we just don't know yet. And there's still a number of things that I would love to be black and white, and they aren't, and they might never be. But I'm going to do my best to tell you everything we have, how we are interpreting it, and then, of course, I know at the end, when we had this webinar on Friday, we had a slew of questions. So I want to leave time for those questions as well. But please listen to the things that I'm telling you during the webinar, because a lot of the questions that you're going to be asking me at the end, I probably have already answered over the course of the webinar. So let's kind of start from the very beginning. Beginning on Friday, May 29th, we had 17 counties that went to green. On May 29th, those restaurants in those counties could begin serving outdoor and indoor at 50%. We're going to get into that. That began on Friday. Those are the only restaurants right now that, Eric, can we mute? Thank you. Those are the only restaurants right now that can sell for any on-premise consumption of food and beverage whatsoever. The only ones that are allowing people to eat on property, even eating their takeout whatsoever. June 5th. June 5th, we have more counties that are entering the green phase. My friends in Allegheny County, congratulations, and those surrounding counties. You will also, on June 5th, be able to do outdoor and indoor dining. The rest of us, those of us that are still in the yellow phase, will be able to begin outdoor dining on June 5th. That is your date. Do not do outdoor dining before then. June 5th is your date to be able to provide outdoor service. And I will answer the LCD question, so please don't ask that one yet. I'm going to get to it. For my friends in Philadelphia, one, my heart breaks for everything that has happened over the weekend in the city. My heart broke even more for what's been happening in our country. But for Philadelphia, we really do not see outdoor dining of any kind being allowed on June 5th. And honestly, the governor has stated that he might not even allow Philadelphia to enter yellow on June 5th. So initially, we thought everybody who is still red would enter yellow. Philadelphia might not, due to what's been going on in the city over the past few days. Even to that end, outdoor dining will not be permitted in Philadelphia. And I always like to say Philadelphia is special. So there will be a different set of rules, I'm sure, for my operators in Philadelphia. And when we get those rules, we will share them. Okay, let's start with outdoor dining. Oh, and I have things in the wrong order. That's not surprising for me. So outdoor dining in yellow. This does not apply to the green people. So all my green people, wait, I'm going to get to you. There are things that you have to do for outdoor dining in yellow. Social distancing between parties. That's no matter what. Yellow, green, bright green. We'll get to bright green. You have to use social distancing between your tables. There can be no bar service. So if you have an outdoor bar in yellow phase doing outdoor dining, you cannot allow your bar to be open. No bar seating. There can be no access to indoor areas. I have gotten this question before. You do outdoor dining, a thunderstorm comes, can you provide service inside the restaurant because a storm came through? No. People will have to run for their cars. They'll either need to have some type of overhang, but they're being very clear that there can be no indoor service to customers to sit and eat their meal in yellow. Now, customers can walk through the restaurant to access an outdoor area. They can use the bathrooms, but there can be no allowance under any circumstances for customers to dine inside the restaurant. There can be no self-service in the yellow version of dining outside. So no buffets, no drinks where people might self-serve their own drinks or go get their own coffee. Condiments, there can be no self-service of condiments to that point. There can be no condiments on the table. Your employees will need to dispense condiments. This is all to reduce any type of spread of COVID. There can be, you can only allow disposable menus in the yellow phase, or if you have digital menus that can be sanitized between use. I know many of you have laminated menus. Those cannot be used in outside dining in the yellow phase. So you have to do disposable menus, menus you can throw out, or digital menus that can be sanitized. No refilling containers brought in by customers. This is really, I mean, to be honest, it's your growlers that your customers might bring in from home. This is if you are a coffee shop and let's say that you sell, you know, a mug and people get a discount if they bring in their refillable mug. There can be no refillable containers that are brought in by the customers during outdoor dining in yellow. Okay. Extension of licensed premise. You cannot extend your premise yet. Please do not call the LCB. Please do not email me anymore. I'm telling you everything you need to know about extension of premise. We have been working with the LCB. For those of you that are liquor nerds, typically when you want to expand your licensed area, which we got guidance from the LCB as it pertains to operating in green or yellow for that matter, you need to apply to the LCB to extend your premise. You have to put up one of those really ugly, well, some people like them, orange placards for 30 days. And then if nobody complains, then you can extend your seating area. That makes absolutely no sense considering you can only operate at 50% if you're in green, or you can't operate at all on the interior. So we've been working with the LCB to fast track that process. There is going to be an application probably via PLCB Plus that is not available yet. It will be available Wednesday or Thursday of this week. So please do not go looking for it. Please do not call the LCB. It is not available yet. But when it is available, you will be able to submit your business where you are extending to, and if it's on your own property, it will be an automatic approval. So you will still be mailed that orange placard, but you will be able to extend your premise from the moment of approval from the LCB. They're prepared to approve these very quickly, if not within a few hours upon you submitting the application. So if you are extending and looking to extend on your own property, that's going to be check the box, you're ready to go on Wednesday or Thursday, not yet. Second box that needs to be checked. I know a lot of you, I've been getting a lot of information and calls from municipalities. So a lot of your municipalities are looking at the idea of expanding sidewalk seating on municipal space, using closing down streets to expand dining for restaurants, using parks to expand dining for restaurants. We are also working with the LCB as opposed to 500 restaurants in a city sending an individual letter from the city saying they're allowed to do it, having one letter that would cover restaurants that want to extend their premise. So for example, if you are in Harrisburg, you get a letter from the municipality saying that you can extend your premise, and you would submit to go out into the street or whatever it is that you negotiated with the city that would allow you to do that. So if you are just extending on your property, that's one thing you have to do. You just have to do it. If you are extending onto municipal property, you will need to work with your municipality to have that letter completed to submit with your extension of premise. All of this, again, please pay attention to our social media. Please pay attention to the daily update. As soon as it is available, we will let you know. I communicated with the LCB again today. They did confirm that it will be available Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. So again, please, I hope I don't get this question in the chat box because I might cry a little bit. Do not try to submit anything right now because that extension will also come free of charge. There's going to be no cost to that extension when typically you have to pay $200 to extend your premise. Okay, let's talk about outdoor dining in green. All of those items I said that you were restricted on before, you're allowed to do for outdoor dining in green. So if you have reusable menus, you can use them. If you want to put condiments on the table, you can put condiments on the table. If you want to do buffets or self-service, those are all permissible in green. So everything that I talked about before, you are now allowed to do in the green phase of indoor and outdoor dining. Indoor dining is permitted at 50% occupancy. You cannot have more than 50% occupancy within your restaurant at any point in time. To that end, you also need to ensure social distancing between your tables. We're talking 6 feet between guests, essentially. So where one person's shoulder ends, you have to have 6 feet between the next person's shoulder. So at the end of the day, you might not even hit 50% occupancy because of the need for the social distancing that you will need to consider as you're setting up your dining room or moving things around. Bar service is also permitted in green for indoor and outdoor. There are some parameters there for that. You can have no more than 4 people, and this was, I will say this, if you've got LCB guidance on Friday, it has since been updated to reflect this. The guidance, sometimes the LCB makes mistakes. I sometimes think they make a lot of them, but they did make one in the guidance that they released on Friday relating to 4 people in a party. Only for bar service, you have to limit it to 4 people in a party. So what you would need for bar service is, let's say you have 2 people together, you need a barrier between that person before the next person at the bar can be there. So you can use barriers, but you can have no more than 4 people in a party sitting at the bar. So that's going to be key. Further on the bar rules, people cannot congregate at the bar. So when people go and there's a wait to get service and they say, I'm going to go to stand at the bar and get a drink, there can be no standing at the bar. People cannot wait in line at the bar to get service. All my nightclubs where you're 2 or 3 or 4 deep, that's not going to happen, at least not for the near future. So the only seating at the bar is people sitting at the bar. Let's keep on going. What's next? Okay, so outside of that, outside of the 50% and the things that you can do in green, there are standards that you have to follow whether you're operating in yellow or green. So it doesn't matter whether it's outdoor, indoor, or both. There are standards that you need to meet in order to operate. So please keep that in mind. And to that end, there are, and I'll get to this in a bit, there's a list of things that you have to do, and then there's a list of things that you should do. And we'll get to that in a minute. One is you have to follow guidance for businesses permitted to operate during the COVID-19 disaster emergency. These are standards that you need to meet just to operate your business. It goes into the fact that your employees need to wear masks, which we will touch upon. It goes into what happens if there is a case of COVID or somebody comes into contact with somebody who has COVID, and the precautions that you need to take at your restaurant, the things that you need to follow. So those are kind of your baseline. No matter what, you need to follow that guidance. Customers should wear masks at all times except when they are seated. So customers, when they come up to the door, should be wearing a mask until they sit at their table with their party. They should be wearing a mask. Upon being seated, they can take their masks off. So I know I'm going to get this question, so I'm going to answer it now. This is like a trick to see who asks me the same question later. Customers need to wear masks. Do they expect you to put somebody in a chokehold if they try to enter the restaurant without a mask? No. And the governor has said this before. People should wear masks. It's the right thing to do to wear masks. He's asking people to wear masks. You should tell people that they should be wearing masks, but it is not your duty, unless you choose to deny them service if they refuse to, especially in the green phase of reopening. People should do it. You should tell them they should. They should want to protect other guests and your employees and you, but you will not be penalized if a guest refuses. You will be penalized if you don't let the guests know that they should be wearing masks. Employees, all of your employees should also be wearing masks. This is the fun part about COVID, is that like when there's a rule, there's like but. So in terms of your employees wearing masks, if they have a health problem that they can't wear masks, they don't have to. And second, and this is really going to be key for your back of the house employees, if it hinders their ability to do their job, they do not need to wear a mask, but you need to be observant of all the other safety precautions that need to take place. So at all times, your employees should be wearing their masks unless, as I said, it hinders their job or they have a medical problem that would prohibit them from doing so. Social distancing, again, that's going to be the metric of compliance. If somebody walks in and if an inspector walks in and your table's up on each other, you're going to get cited. So you really just need to be cognizant of that and careful of that in terms of it. To that end, there's a lot of 6-foot distances. For example, for those of you that have sidewalk cafes, in the regulations, it says that you need to have 6 feet from the end of the table to the end of the sidewalk. That's not really achievable for many of you that are on a narrow sidewalk. It is not that people are going to be walking around with a tape measure measuring 6 feet. It's not going to be like that. But you do need to make sure that you don't move your sidewalk cafes out so much that passerbys only have 1.5 feet to walk by. That's going to ding you. So it's really what we're looking at here is a good faith effort. And I'll touch upon that again in another moment. So social distancing, you're 6 feet, 6 foot's the rule for the foreseeable future right now. Gaming, if you have any arcade games, have to continue to be closed. Dance floors, this was the blow up of, I think, Friday's webinar. Dance floors are not allowed to be open. So if you are a nightclub or you're anywhere that has people congregating, that's like a curse word now, that is not permitted in yellow or green, or what I like to call the dull green, which is the green phase that we're in right now. Child play areas also need to be closed. Dance floors also for my private event folks. This is going to be one for you as well, and I will get to private events in a moment. You're going to want to make sure you're assigning an employee to frequently sanitize high-touch areas. This is going to be key in terms of just ensuring that your guests see that you're cleaning, that you're sanitizing, you're doing everything to make their experience safe. And further to that end, we're going to continue to be using tape and markers regarding social distancing. So if you typically have lines between, for the bathroom, make sure you have markers that are ensuring people are 6 feet apart. If you have people, you're so popular, people sometimes want to wait for a table or they're waiting to access the restaurant, you're going to want markers outside of the restaurant. To that end, like I said before, we are at 50% occupancy. So for those of you that are selling mixed drinks or cocktails to go, that will not stop when you hit green. The parameters for that is once you hit 60% occupancy. And of course in green, we are at 50%. So you will not need to stop doing mixed drinks. The entire premise of that bill is to recognize that we are not operating normally. And we need every little bit of help that we can get to operate normally. So your mixed drinks will continue until we get to what I refer to as green or bright green. To that, like I said, this is you needing to protect your employees, protect your guests. This is not, like I said, a game of gotcha. Your inspectors aren't going to be coming in, like I said, with a tape measure. But there are certain things that you need to do, and you do need to be making a best effort. And that's really going to be part of all of this. Please do not say, this is terrible, I hate what's happening, I'm just going to open up 100%. You will get your license pulled. I don't know how else to say that, whether it's Department of Ag, whether it's LCE, please make sure that you're following these guidelines, because the more we follow them, the faster we're going to get onto the other side of this. Let's talk about some items of note. Barriers. We will be getting updated guidance from the governor's office. John received an email from them last week. Right now, the language does not say that you can use barriers between booths, but they will be permitted. So barriers between people sitting at the bar, between parties at the bar, barriers between your booths. If you have a barrier between your booth, you do not need to have the social distancing there. So it's 6 feet or barrier. So that will help you fill up some of your booths if that's your restaurant model. Okay, this is the question, one of maybe the second question to the LCB questions. There is not a limit of how many people can be in a single party. So they suggest to make sure that individual parties are 10 people or less, but there is not a limit that you have to follow there. That's kind of in the suggestion piece of it. To that point, it is suggested that you require reservations. That helps with contact tracing if there is some type of contamination that occurs at the establishment. It is not required. So those are kind of two things I know we get a lot of questions about. Like I said, they suggest 10 guests. It's not required. You're not limited to just 10 guests in a party. You're not limited to just family members in a party. A party is a party. A party is the group of people that come in and say that they want to sit at the same table together. Also, for if you are a type of business where you kind of have those giant long picnic tables or seating tables, I know a lot of breweries have them, you need to ensure social distancing in those scenarios between each party. Again, another item, of course, is having your employees seat people. So if you do have an open seating concept, you might want to consider changing that to have a host or hostess seat people to ensure that social distancing requirement is met. Do no contact as much as possible. If you can do in the bathrooms, faucets that people don't have to touch. If you can do online ordering, if you can do iPads on the table where people can order their food and have as little human interaction with other humans as possible, that's all urged to kind of control the spread of COVID. Disposable items when possible. This is another question I get pretty often. There is no requirement that you use disposable plates, napkins, silverware in yellow or in green, especially in yellow is where I get this. It's not required, but it is something that you might want to think about in terms of operationally ensuring sanitization and making sure that you, as you're beginning to open, you're checking all of the boxes that you need to. And that leads me to, as you can see on the document, we do have an infographic that's going to make it a little clearer because the document itself kind of goes, you know, this is what you have to do in yellow, this is green and yellow, this is some more yellow. So we're streamlining an infographic for all of you to be able to reference. But in that document, like I said, there are things that you have to do and there are things that you're really going to want to think about doing. Because the easy part, and I know it's hard even thinking that this is the easy part because the easy part is hard. The easy part is going to be checking the boxes that the government needs you to check. The hard part is going to be doing what you need to do to make your customers feel safe and want to come back to your restaurant. So there are a lot of things that I know people are thinking about that you should continue to think about, that even though you're not required to, it might be something you want to do, like I said, so that people will want to come out. They're going to want that experience. We all have cabin fever like crazy. But please, like I said, look at the document. There are things that you need to do. There are things that you should do, and you should think about those should things as potentially things that you might want to incorporate into your business. Okay, let's get into the third most asked question. And don't get mad at me because it's better than it could be, but I know that this is like catering and private events is what is keeping people up at night. And we don't have great news, but we're going to try and tell you what we know. In yellow, still most restrictive. Currently in yellow until Friday, you can't have any type of food or beverage service whatsoever. Beginning on Friday in yellow counties, you can have events of 25 people or less. Those events can only be outside. So even in yellow, just like restaurants, and that's what they're saying. They're saying for my hotels, my catering companies, my event venues, you need to follow the guidance that the restaurants have right now until the administration develops specific guidance for larger groups and private events, which John is working with them on as I speak. But in yellow, you can do outdoor dining for a private event. 25 people is your cap. Even with social distancing between tables, it is looked at as 25 people congregating for a private event. That's your ceiling for yellow. In green, so here we go. 250 people is your max. You cannot have 250 people. I don't care how big your space is. 250 people is the maximum amount of people you can have for any private event. So keep that top of mind. I don't care if you can fit 1,000 people in your event venue, you can still only have a maximum of 250. Second, occupancy cannot exceed 50%. So if you have a space for 100 people, that's your fire code, that's what it says, 100 people. You can't have more than 50 people in that space. That's your second, I call it the trickle down of catering. Third, you still must have social distancing. So for your tables, if you have a 10 top, you need 6 feet between that 10 top and the next 10 top. So those are things that you really need to think about as you're setting things up. You don't need 6 feet for those tables between individuals. You don't need to put like 2 people at a 10 top, but you do need to have spacing between each table. To that end, and I mentioned this before, and I cringe when I said it before, and I'll cringe again when I say it now. Our interpretation is that dance floors aren't permitted, and the purpose is to avoid congregating. I have been to many, many weddings in my life, and I dance like no one's watching. Literally, dance like no one's watching. Our interpretation is that dance floors are not allowed, even for a private catered event. Now, if people get up at a private wedding and just decide they're going to start dancing in the middle of the ballroom, there's nothing you can do about that. But laying down the dance floor and allowing it to happen is where you are going to get dinged here. I know it doesn't sound reasonable. I know it sounds frustrating. We are continuing to work on this, but those are the rules as we understand them right now. Like I said, that 250, 50% social distancing are your 3 boxes you need to check for private catered events, at least in dull green or regular green. Okay, we're nearing the end, and then I will take all of the questions. So obviously we continue to ask for further clarification from the governor's office, and we are continuing to request it, and sometimes we receive it, and sometimes the response, and it's not just for us, the response is kind of like, do the best you can, because we can't give you a blanket policy for all different types of businesses. But we are continuing to submit questions and asking for feedback. We are continuing to push on the private events, the catered events, allowing you to use a space as long as social distancing is allowed. We're continuing to push I know festivals and outdoor events, which have more than 250 people, are not allowed right now. We're continuing to advocate for that as well. But people want to know when is bright green. So it's not going to be like red was 2 weeks for some of you, yellow is 2 weeks, and now you're green. I do not expect bright green to be like that. I do think that there will be a bright green. Clearly, we are not at 100% operations. And I don't think we're going to be right away. I think that we will probably be stuck in dull green or regular green for a month, possibly, before we can see that the cases haven't increased, these are working, and that parameters can be lifted. So this is probably going to be the longest of the phases that we have been in so far. And our efforts within our industry and the efforts of other businesses that are operating, because let's be honest here, we aren't the bad guys in this. We've been sanitizing and doing it right from the very beginning. But just the nature of our business, the congregating that naturally happens and always had happened in our business, is why we really need to be careful now to stop the spread of this disease, especially within our businesses. So bright green, we will get there. I know the governor has said in the past that we will not see bright green or normal until a vaccine happens. I would not take that to the bank. Like I said, I think it's really going to be based on cases. And as long as case numbers keep on dropping because people are being careful, I think that we're going to be entering a next phase of green over the course of the summer. For more information, go to our website, PRLA.org/coronavirus. We have so much stuff is on there. We have our webinars. We have ability to access PPE in addition to reusable menu options, barriers, all of that's on our website. Literally everything you need to know is on our website at PRLA.org/coronavirus. And I know that we are getting questions. And so with that, I think I will jump over to the question portion of.
And Melissa, Ben's been answering a lot along the way, so I can pull out the ones that weren't answered that I don't know either. The first one is, are there restrictions for the amount of customers that can enter the facility to use the restroom for any reason?
There are not restrictions, but you need to space them 6 feet apart. So I would either say use your markers, or you're going to have employees that are going to want to make sure that if, let's say you really can only have 3 people waiting in line at a time, ensuring that is the case. Your employees are going to be key in terms of compliance and ensuring safety.
Okay. I think you covered this already, but can informing customers about masks do I have to have a sign, or can this be done verbally?
We have a sign available to download. You could tell people verbally. I think you'll check a box. If you want to be super safe, the sign covers you in case you have an employee who doesn't mention it. Just having something on the front door when people are entering, I think that gives you some cover in case people aren't reminding them as they enter the establishment.
If you're offering a buffet in the green phase, do guests need to wear masks while visiting the buffet?
Yes. I mean, even in green, masks should be worn anytime a guest is not seated at the table. Now, like I said, should you strong arm people if they don't? You can't, but you have to be aware of the optics as well of somebody who might be going up to the buffet and might cough into a salad, which now I'm really cringing. But yes, anytime a customer is not seated at the table, they should be wearing a mask, and they should be told that they should be wearing a mask.
Is there no limit to parties, only for green or also for yellow?
There is no, well, yellow's your 25. You can't have 25 more at a specific space. But no, the governor's office did not put a requirement in terms of limit to parties. They suggest 10 people or less, but there is no set requirement.
$250 for public or private events or both. I know there was discussions regarding the difference in the ability to get to control the guest, et cetera. Robin probably was in on one of the catering meetings, and we're trying to define private events different than public, because we didn't think we were going to get, frankly, $250 at all. So $250 is for either right now.
Correct.
And then moving forward, there may be a differentiation. Correct, Melissa?
Yes, and we've seen, I know this just might be the nature of my Facebook friends, a lot of raceways tried to open and they have been shut down. So $250 even for public events where you're doing your best to ensure social distancing, they are coming down hard on that number. Now, to that end, there is talk about professional sports coming back and getting approval from the Department of Health, but we do not know what those parameters look like.
So putting 10 people at a table isn't keeping within social distancing, but keeping the 10-person table 6 feet apart is the rule?
As we understand it, that is how we are interpreting it, because for us to interpret it so literally, it's just impossible to space people 6 feet apart at a 10 top. But John, I know you work with the governor's office. I don't know if you have more flavor to add there.
No, I think that's the case. It's 10 people is a party, and it actually can be more than 10 people, and you just have to have the spacing between the tables, not within the people at a table, which is good news. Can restaurants hold private events for guests like baby showers?
Ben got that one right. I mean, it depends what phase you are in. So
Okay.
if you are in yellow and there's a baby shower with 25 people or less and you're doing it outside, that would be permitted. But in yellow, you can have no inside events. You have to wait until green and you can have those events, but those catering private events restrictions would apply.
There's one about, in a private event, invitation only, Tony and Tina's wedding without dancing. I think you kind of covered the dancing already, Melissa. Maybe need to do it again.
Well, I mean, and we are trying, and this is what we hope next phase will be for the governor's office, is if it is a private event, if a list of attendees are provided to you and there's no one else from the outside public that you don't know about, we believe that would be an ability to allow dancing or allow maybe some of the things that you can't right now. The governor's office, as of right now, has not differentiated in any way between a private event and a public event. And that's kind of where we're stuck. Logically, we believe that we will take a step forward in terms of, like I said, a private event and maybe being able to do a bit more. We aren't there yet.
If you're down to Michelle's, I'll let you read it.
In green, private event. Can food be served to guests when they are not seated, such as a reception instead of sit-down dinner? Can drinks be served to guests from a banquet bar without bar seating? In green, yes. Yes, in green, you do not need to be seated in a private event. Yellow, no dice. In green, that would be permitted. Though I will say you want to be thinking about this thing as well. If you're walking around handing out past hors d'oeuvres, how are you ensuring that, you know, the guest who picked up one puff of something, you know, is being protected from the other? So you might just want to be careful in that. I would need to look again, but I do not believe you have to be required to sit down in green. It's just in yellow that you have to have sit-down seating for service, for food service. I see where can drinks be served to guests from a banquet bar without bar seating. I would do, you'd have to do social distancing leading up to it, but I think that would be a reasonable application. Question about hors d'oeuvres during private events. Butler passed okay. Table to choose own if in small groups at a time. Bar service at events. None of those have been delineated in the guidance that we've received. So we would assume that if there's not a ban on them, and Butler Pass could be considered a buffet to a certain extent, people are self-serving, we would consider them to be okay. But again, like I said, we are telling you, reading from the guidance we have from the governor's office, this is how we interpret it. And hopefully we will get more clarification from the governor's office soon, or that we might not get any clarification and we're just going to continue to operate with what we know.
One of the things I'll point out that Melissa already touched on earlier is part of this is what's in the law, and part of this is what your customers are going to expect. So I would be careful on that. I think for some period of time, people are going to be concerned about those kind of things. So if you're going to do Butler Pass, you might want to do Butler Pass where the server actually takes them with tongs and puts them on the napkin for the guest. Not required, but something that guests might greatly appreciate under these circumstances.
John, do you want to talk about the restaurant promise?
Sure. We developed the restaurant promise for the 3 reasons that I mentioned earlier, Deborah, if you were on there. One is to provide you with some basic guidelines and tools to help serve your guests and cause your employees to be as safe as possible. It's not all the rules, but it's guidelines and best practices. The second part, which is probably equally important, is a commitment to the public, to tell the public that we're doing everything we can to try to provide a safe environment. We have a higher level of standards than previously because of the COVID-19. And yes, there is a door hanger that you can use, and you can have it for free. We have the artwork on our website. Ben's probably going to put a link out to it right now too, knowing Ben. And you can either print it either on some sort of stock with your own printer, or if you like to, it's printer ready, so you could send it to your local printer. And then there's another version that hangs like maybe behind the hostess stand that gives you a little bit more detail. And then there's the full promise, which you would keep, which you would share with your team members. Again, it's all designed to help people understand that we take our jobs as providing safe environments very seriously. It's also going to be pushed out by the Department of Community and Economic Development in a much bigger way. It's going to get a fair amount of press. So it's something that's going to, I think, help you if you have it posted on your door. No charge. It's one of the services we provide, and hopefully you'll find it helpful.
Okay. I should have gotten this from before. When does Chester County go green? Welcome to the mystical land that's the governor and secretary of health's decision-making process, of which the parameters can change. Technically, I think a lot of people that are going yellow now probably didn't hit the parameters as we understood them. I cannot tell you when Chester County will go green. The fact that Chester County isn't going yellow until next week, I think the 2 weeks following that and how your counts look are going to delineate how green looks. So we cannot predict it. It is up to the governor. Like I said, in some of our north central, northwest counties, they were in for 2 or 3 weeks, then flipped to green. It's just going to be dependent on the counts. If you have a spike, you're not going to go green in 2 weeks or 3 weeks for that matter. Do employees count in the capacity number? We are pushing to have employees not count in the capacity number. John is advocating for that. As of right now, we have not gotten an agreement from the governor's office that they are exempt. So on the basis of just playing it safe, you should include them, which I know is not the right answer, what people want to hear, which is why we're working hard to have them be exempt.
Yeah, if I can, just for a second,
Yep.
Melissa, we were kind of surprised at that interpretation. Different states have handled it differently, but our point is that we have a very labor-intensive industry, much more so than virtually any other retail establishment out there. And we have a lot of people that never come into the guest area. They're working back of the house, and they should not be included in the count. And the initial response is that they'll take it under advisement, but it still stays. But I do want to say that Governor Wolf has taken a lot of heat throughout this whole process, and he gets almost nothing but criticism. He's trying to do what he thinks is right, whether we agree with it or not. And I will say, as far as the restaurant industry goes, they've been very responsive to all of our questions and requests. They don't agree with everything we say, but they take everything very seriously and do the research on it, like adding the booth dividers, which weren't in the original one, like doing outdoor dining in yellow, which was not originally planned. So hopefully they'll see that this makes sense to take employees out of the capacity number. We should have an answer on that shortly.
Okay, so we talked about employee counts. Did you say that it is not required to use disposable plates and flatware? That is correct. You are not required to use disposable plates and flatware. You can, you are not required. I have a restaurant and an event center. Am I allowed to seat both at 50% with social distancing? It's got to be 50, yes, as long as you are delineating, well, you would add up the two. It depends if they're connected, I guess. But yes, 50%, but you have to have social distancing. So if social distancing takes up less than 50% occupancy, then you would have less than 50% occupancy. If we do a large party like a wedding, what is the max we can have at each table? Sorry, I missed something about that. There is no maximum at a table. So it would just be how you're set up for a private event. Like I said, they discussed not having more than 10 people at a table, but the guidance doesn't delineate a maximum amount of people at a single table.
It's a recommendation, not a requirement.
Correct. Are we allowed to give people salt, pepper shakers, ketchup bottles if they're taken from the table between seatings? Not in yellow. In green, you may. Yes, still not clear. Assume a private event in an outdoor area with 3 tables that each seat 8 people. Must the 6-foot shoulder social distance be maintained, or is that no longer applicable if it's a private event? The way we read it, you still have to have the 6-foot shoulder to shoulder applied. And like I said, we need a delineation between public service at a restaurant and private events. The governor's office has not provided that delineation. So right now they are saying that you need to follow the guidance that restaurants need to follow, which means that you need 6 feet between the end of shoulder of the person at one table before the next table begins.
Yeah, and as Melissa said, this is table to table, not person to person. I think that's clear, but I want to make sure we're not misinterpreting the question.
Who are the government officials that are doing the inspections? Department on the state level, Department of Ag and LCE, the BLCE, which is the enforcement version of the Liquor Control Board. A lot of you are in counties where you have your local government saying they aren't going to enforce. That does not protect you from enforcement from the state. So, and they do have, you know, the fines and the penalties if you operate in violation of these orders listed on all of their websites. Is there somewhere online that we can access all of this and print it out? It is, Ben already got it. Thank you, Ben. What is the estimated amount of time that will lapse between yellow and green? It's been a minimum of 2 weeks. For some of you that have higher case counts or you have an increase in your case counts, it's probably going to be longer. Every Friday, the governor announces the next round of counties that are going to move to the next phase. And for the most part, we don't always know who that's going to be until the announcement comes. And historically, there's been counties that we thought should be part of it and weren't. So a minimum of 2 weeks more, depending on the announcement. Trip, I don't understand your question. How would you suggest we post a Zoom PRLA chapter meeting? That Heidi, I think, is posting Zoom PRLA chapter meetings. Is that the right answer, John?
Yes.
Okay, yes. We are a private venue. Are we allowed to request a list of guests for all parties prior to event? You are not required, you are allowed, and to be honest, is probably a pretty good best practice if you are able to do so. That's going to help. God forbid there's something that happens or somebody comes down with it, you know who is at the event. So you're certainly allowed to request that. Yes, the dance floor thing is an issue. We agree.
Heather, we'll add your comment to our arguments.
Will there be surprise inspections by the state asking for a friend? Yes, they are. I don't think a day goes by where I don't get a call from someone who says the LCE popped up or Department of Ag popped up for an inspection. They are, for people that like you're supposed to get inspected like once a year because they didn't have resources to do more. They found resources because they are out and about. And they're certainly following up on complaints as well. Classroom seating for meetings. On its face, 6 feet between each individual. I'm rolling my eyes as I say it because I think that's a little not feasible or the best way, but that's how we are interpreting the guidance as it has been presented to us. So that's unfortunately the answer that I have for that. I think if you at least seat people every other seat, I think that might be helpful. Like I said, they're not coming around with, a tape measure to measure 6 feet, but they're certainly going to know if somebody's up on another person.
And think about the distance between your rows when you set up the classroom setting too, because normally you would be too close. So if you set up the right distance between the rows, that'll say a lot if you would ever get inspected.
Is anyone going to require temperature checks for guests, and how do we approach this hospitably? It is not required. Temperature checks for guests are not required. The only temperature checks that are required is if one of your employees comes down with COVID, you need to temperature check employees for 2 weeks following that. And then again, the frustration on social distancing. We don't disagree with it, and we certainly wish that the response would be there are different rules for private events, and we certainly believe there will be. But as of right now, all we know is to apply the guidance that we received from the governor's office to any type of event where there is food and beverage service. And I will give it another few minutes to take any additional questions that I might just say I agree with you and not have an answer to. I feel like we always get to that point in the webinar where I just agree with you because we want more answers and clearer guidance as well.
Seems like you were very thorough.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, as always, we do have this recorded and we'll be sending it out to everyone. Oh, here we go. One more.
So in green, we can use salt and pepper shakers. Yes, condiments are permitted to be on the table. You should wipe them down between each group of customers sitting at the table. But you can have condiments on the table. Yeah, so let me speak to this. So if we get big amounts of guidance from the governor's office, we will have another reopening call. But to that end, and I know some people are on here, every Wednesday, I do what I call my brain dump of information. This is everything we've learned in the past week. It's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. I spend about 25 minutes going over everything we know relating to reopening, legislation, federal stuff, unemployment, all of that. So if we get any more information, that will be covered in my weekly Wednesday webinars. And then of course, if we get it like really, all of a sudden catering makes sense and it's a whole new world and logical world for my caterers and private event folks, we will have a separate webinar just to that end. Regular menus are permitted in green. I'll cover that again. Green menus are fine. Laminated menus, you should be wiping them down between use. It's only in yellow that you have to have disposable menus or iPads or some type of device, electronic device for that. Hold on, let me see. Buffet style is normal and not cafeteria style. John, is that a?
I think what you mean is that it have to be an attended buffet. In green, you can have it unattended. So you don't have to actually serve out to each guest. They can serve themselves in green. In yellow, there can be no unattended or self-serve buffets.
Unemployment, stay tuned for Wednesday's webinar. I refuse to answer P3 questions and unemployment questions on Friday, so I can't break the rule now because I'll get yelled at from the people who ask those questions on Friday. Please register and join Wednesday's webinar where I will be happy to discuss unemployment, P3, recovery efforts, and everything in between.
All right. I think we're at an hour. Thanks, Melissa and John, and thank you everybody for joining us. You can register for the Wednesday meetings through our daily email. The link will be on there, and you can also go to our webinar under coronavirus. Under the webinars, there will be a link to register for a variety of different webinars we have coming this week. And with that, we will get you a recorded copy of this out and keep you guys up to date every day.
And my dog is snoring, so that must mean that this was once again a riveting webinar for everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Melissa and John.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, Hope.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.